811 at WIBX, 736-0186 is our telephone number. Later on in the hour, we're going to talk to Cassandra Sheets, and she is Executive Director of the Center for Family Life and Recovery, which is suicide prevention. Of course, a lot of people talking about this, and as Christine said, it is kind of opening up the line of communication when it comes to suicide and depression and mental illness. Shepard Smith doesn't believe in any of it. He apologized yesterday for calling Robin Williams a coward while he was reporting on the news of Robin's death. It was really a low blow. Everybody on Twitter ripped him apart for it. Here is, I believe this is the comment that he actually made on air.
The children grieving tonight because their father killed himself in a fit of depression. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? You could love three little things so much, watch them grow, and they're in their mid-20s, and they're inspiring you and exciting you, and they fill you up with a kind of joy you could never have known, and yet something inside you is so horrible, or you're such a coward, or whatever the reason, that you decide you have to end it. Robin Williams at 63 did that today.
He later apologized for those comments. I think that is one of those things that you tell somebody who's saying, listen, I'm going to kill myself. And you say to them, you can't do that. It's the easy way out. You can't. Things will turn around. You'll be able to turn things around. This is not the way to go. But after somebody commits that horrid act, I'm not sure that's the way to react to it. Andrew. Yesterday, Andrew was very quiet yesterday about this whole topic. And until the end of the morning, you came to me and said that you wanted to talk about something.
Yes. So basically, I have had a run-in with the issue of suicide before, personally. My father has severe depression, a lot worse than I do. But I think that in some way, genetically, it was transferred to me in a not as severe form that he has. He is on some medication for it. But the idea or concept of suicide entered my life back when I was 12 years old. During my parents' divorce, my dad was going through a lot. He did not take the divorce well, and that combined with his depression, it didn't mix well for him. So my first really exposure to that was around then, to the point where it had, and for reasons that I didn't understand and really didn't know why, I had wanted to do it. I had wanted to, or had thoughts of ending my life first when I was 12 years old, to the point where there were some attempts, and nothing too serious because really, honestly, I didn't know what I was doing at the time. You know,
did you made attempts?
Yes, the first time was when I was 12, and just to put it out there, I have not had any feelings like that, nor will I, and I'll get to why in a little bit. But so my first run-in with this issue for me was when I was 12. So there were a few attempts, hanging-like attempts when I was 12.
Are you saying you tried to hang yourself when you were 12 years old?
Yes, but not. It was not in the form of really. Yeah, I guess I did. Yeah,
okay.
I mean, it was.
Right.
There's no really way around it.
Yeah, I know you're struggling with your words.
I didn't know how to successfully. I mean, because I'm 12 years old.
Yeah.
So I didn't know.
So, but you tried.
Yes. So that was the first time was when I was 12. So
Was
that's
it
when
kind
I
of-
first. Yeah. That's when I first recognized that I had issues with depression, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that I didn't know how to handle the emotions and feelings that I was experiencing
With divorce.
with the divorce,
Yeah.
and my father's reaction to the divorce.
Yeah.
So, I had seen some counselors, and I had seen a counselor for a while, and then nothing had really happened until I was about 17. No further attempts until I was 17 years old. And so I was in a relationship at the time, and that wasn't really the main thing, but there were a lot of things going on. I was really stressed in my schoolwork. And
So you tried again when you were 17.
17, yeah. And these were more almost close call cases.
Right, you're a little older, and you.
Yeah, I had kind of known I guess conceptually how to do it.
Yeah.
And so my room used to be in the basement of our house, and so there was a time I was home alone, and there was a lot going on in my life, and it wasn't just this relationship that I was in, but there were a lot of different factors. I was working a lot and trying to balance schoolwork and extracurricular activities I was involved in, and these negative feelings that I had that I could not really control. And I was at a point where I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know where else to turn. I didn't know how to stop making myself feel this way. So one evening at my home, in my room in my basement, I had decided that I think that I wanted to end my life for reasons I didn't understand.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the way the depression had overtaken me was I have this desire to be miserable, to not feel good, and nothing anybody could say or do would help it. And I had gotten to a point where this I felt was my only realistic or logistical option, was to end my life. So in that brief moment that I was attempting it, that's all I could think about was myself.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about anybody else because I didn't know what else to do. So I was close enough to the sense, so to describe it, and I'm going to get I'm going to get detailed here because I think it's important. The reason I'm doing this is I think it's important to share my story, because if I can help somebody else that's maybe in trouble or having these thoughts, to give a perspective of somebody that was there. So the ceiling had a lowered piece of wood or a block that had some nails in it. And I stood up on a chair, and I took a lanyard that you would hang your keys from, and I put one end of the lanyard around the nail in the ceiling, and the other end around my neck, and I kicked the chair out. And so for a brief moment, I was there, I was hanging there, and the nail gave out in the ceiling. And so that was for me the first. It was kind of an eye-opening experience, but there was a little bit of frustration that came in that it had failed. So I went over to the basement stairs, and there's a railing that goes up the side of the stairs, and then there's an open space for where the stairs are going into the basement. So what I did was I had tried to take my bed sheet and I put it around the railing and kind of, let myself off the side of the steps so that I was, cutting off the air supply. And then there was a point where all of a sudden my mom, my sister Mary, who is 9 now, she was about 2 years of age at the time, and all my family had kind of crept into my mind, and just for some lucky reason I had decided to stop, and I was able to do it, thank goodness.
Yeah.
And so basically what ended up stopping me from doing this was the fact that I had my family, and what would that have done, and how would my mom, if even my other sister who was, so she's 17 now, she was 10 years old at the time, what if she had come into the basement and seen that, and all those thoughts started to run through my mind. So the frustration and the anger and the self-loathing at that time had kind of gone away because those thoughts started to enter my mind. And luckily, I was not under the influence of anything. It was just me in my depressed episode, or in that moment of weakness, I guess you can say, that stopped me from, luckily I wasn't under the influence of anything, because I think that in a lot of cases for people who were in my position at that time, if they have that extra, if they're
drugs or alcohol
is involved, they don't have that.
It numbs
their inhibitions are gone,
right,
so
right,
they don't have any way of stopping themselves, or they almost have that courage in a way. The liquid or the courage of alcohol or drugs can really put you over the edge and be the difference between a close call and death. And so, after that, I told my mom about it, and it just, to see her reaction to the fact that I had wanted to end my life was also a lesson to be learned, because what is that? I mean, it must have been all the thoughts going on in her mind. Why would he do this? Why would he, because my mom, it never had anything to do with making me depressed. So I think for her, it was understanding why I would want to do something like this to myself. And
did you get any treatment for that, Andrew?
I did. I finally saw somebody, and I tried a few medications. But I think really, ultimately, and just to kind of talk about what I think Jeff was trying to say is that sometimes people don't think about the people that they could leave behind or the effect that they can have on those that live on after you're gone. And so to that, I mean, to think about that, there is some truth to that. Like, people don't think about it, but you don't think about it at the time.
Well,
you're thinking that your only option is this.
And think of, had you been successful the first time.
Yeah.
The only reason that you're here today is because that nail broke.
Right. And it's I think back on it, and it's scary sometimes, you know. And even the fact that in that moment there was a time before the nail had been released or broke that I was up there, you know. And you know, I just think about, you know, how I've seen how sad my dad is, and luckily he's on the right path. And I think the biggest point to realize is that depression is a disease, and counselors I've talked to, and in talking to my mom about it, that it's a disease just like anything else. You know, you can't say to a diabetic, "Oh, well, you've got diabetes. You know, there's something wrong with you." I mean, it's a disease just like any other disease. Depression is, and that's what I was, you know, I came to understand from seeking help medically from psychiatrists and other people that I've talked to, is that that's part of the biggest. I think that's part of the problem with people with depression, is that they always believe that, or most of the time believe that there's something wrong with them, or that it's something negative, or it's reflective of them as a person, you know, of who they are. You know, I've got depression, so I'm less of a person. I don't think a lot of people, and that's part of the problem too, is that denial and that the negative connotation that's kind of gone along with it for people. It's hard for me to accept that I have depression. You know, it's not as bad as some people,
right? You
know, or as bad as my dad, but it's there and it's prevalent and it's real, and I feel it. And there's times, sometimes, and nothing. And I've never had a thought about it since. Again, because my family means too much to me. But there are times where there's days where I just am pissed off and annoyed and really down on myself and sad for no reason. And it's just, I can't explain it. I don't know what triggers it, but it happens. But the best thing that I can just do is keep my head up and, you know, look towards the people in my life that care about me, and all the people that have helped me get to where I am now. And I take comfort in that, you know. And sometimes that isn't enough. Sometimes medication is needed. Sometimes therapy is needed. But the point is that if anybody's, you know, I would just say that if anybody is really feeling down about themselves, or has considered it, or the thought has entered their mind, don't be ashamed. I mean, a lot of the time, too, I never wanted to tell my mom. She's going to be mad. Right. She's going to be mad if she knows this, you know. She's going to get angry with me. I think a lot of the time, too, that I dealt with that a lot, too, is I didn't want to tell anybody what I was feeling, because I didn't want them to think me selfish, or think me like I was trying to get attention, or, you know, that I, you know, was, you know, I didn't want anybody to think that
you don't want somebody to think that you're crazy, that something's wrong with you.
And that's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
It's, first of all, that's an amazing story, but I think it's incredibly valuable because, you know, knowing you in the capacity that we know you, you're very effervescent. You're very full of life. And I don't think anybody would ever think about that.
Right. I would never have pegged Andrew as somebody who has tried that. Right, because of his personality.
Right, and your family, having met the few members of your family that I have, seem so warm and loving. I would never have said, oh, you know, that's the family. And I think that that's probably the situation in many of these cases. You know, you just don't think that person is.
And I was talking about my mom. I was talking with my mom about this last night. You look at Robin Williams, and this is kind of what I was going through, because in high school I was always a class clown. I always put up this huge front, and I never really let on to anybody how I was feeling. But you make this effort you always constantly make this effort to make everybody else smile, everybody else laugh, everybody else happy, but you're incapable of making yourself happy. And that's what I think I was going through. I would go above and beyond to try and always please everybody else and make sure that they were okay, and never once gave myself a thought. And I think maybe that's kind of what Robin Williams was going through. I mean, you always saw him as a guy that was laughing and joking and smiling and making people laugh, but behind, it's like the sad clown thing. You don't know what that person is going through. And a lot of the time, I think that my outgoing personality was always just to try and mask or cover up the true feelings that I had. And so, I think that in some way, a lot of people who are, maybe comedic or have that outgoing personality, those are sometimes the people that you really need to be careful about, because
it's like
they're not showing their cards, like you said. They're not.
It's like anything else. The couple you look at that just seems like the happiest couple in the world, and then you find out they're getting a divorce or something bad happens. You're like, how could that happen to them? They were just so happy. Mm-hmm. People do, it's part of their defense mechanism to cover up. Coming up, we will speak with Cassandra Sheets. She's the executive director of the Center for Family Life and Recovery, Suicide Prevention. But to think that you were a broken nail away from not being here is pretty shocking.
Yeah, it's surreal. It's very surreal.
Yeah. I'd be producing my own show.
Yeah.
Well, how could I do it?
Well, thank goodness.
I couldn't do it.
Yeah, thank goodness that nail broke, and I'm here because I would never go back to that dark place, no matter what was going on in my life, because I just, that's
well, you would know to go out and get help.
Yes, definitely.
If something happened.
Yeah.
We'll break, and we will talk to Cassandra Sheets from Suicide Prevention coming up in a second. It's really interesting how this Robin Williams story, how big celebrity can all of a sudden open up doors to people talking about something and like this that never have talked. Almost his death gives people the strength to be able to say, all right, listen, I got through this, and here's what I'd like to say to prevent somebody else from ever going through this, what I went through.
Yeah.
And that's what I think your goal is today. 828 WIBX.